Good evening. Welcome to the very first production of the Ministry of Truth broadcast under the new name. We used to be named Asshole Mode Activated. Now, if you're aware of any of our previous videos, you'll see why. Now, for the purposes of the first three videos, they're going to be all falling under the same name, Operation Arcane Chaos. In the first part, we're going to be dealing with the current information and events that are present with us. The second part is going to be dealing about the past, and we'll have a little bit more to discuss on there further. The third part will be the reasons behind secrecy. But in the meantime, let's get you updated for anybody who's been living under a rock during this time. In the spring of 2020, the mass media, all walks of government, the entire population of the world's healers, surgeons, and doctors, and the internet pleaded, commanded, ordered, and enforced the quarantine and or lockdown of all human events on the planet for 14 days, which was to be followed by 14 more consecutive days of smaller amounts of COVID-19 cases being detected. This was known as flattening or diminishing the curve. During this time, in the Western Hemisphere, protests against a conclusively agreed-upon strategy to save as many lives as possible was obstructed by those who refused to commit themselves to the equivalent of just 4% of the average 6-month prison sentence that is given here in Canada. 2 weeks in solitary confinement, except this was to be served in your own home. In many first world countries such as France, Italy, Germany, Britain, Canada, Australia, and the United States of America, their governments committed to giving each and every citizen in their country a certain amount of surplus cash per month to compensate for the loss of work hours. They also intended on paying the employers their rental fees to avoid evictions. As noted, the best case scenario that everybody had hoped for was that everybody would stay home for 14 days so the virus would essentially become extinct after every last virus died of old age locked inside the proverbial solitary prison cells of our homes. And as I said, this was the hope. March 18th, 2020. Today is July 24th, 2020. 128 days later, the virus has spread across the globe according to the numbers agreed upon by most scientists and doctors. As of today, 14 million people have been infected by the virus, some of them multiple times in just 4 months. About half of these 14 million, 7.62 million specifically, have recovered. However, they show no immunological response. Some of them have gotten it more than once, and others are still at risk of getting it again. Of the 13 million that have confirmed positive for COVID-19, 586,000 have died. While the global percentage has continued to remain low, the current fatality rate is 4.28%. However, that number has fluctuated throughout the months anywhere between 0.008% and 20%. The most lethal part of this virus comes in two parts: hospital space and the public support. The official name for the virus that causes COVID-19 is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus Type 2, or SARS Coronavirus 2. It belongs in the same family of coronaviruses as SARS and its Middle Eastern counterpart MERS. They are known as betacoronaviruses. Also known as the Nipah betacoronavirus, it is carried naturally by the flying fox, or Old World fruit bat, indigenous to Oceania on the island of Palau. The virus causes scarring on the lungs, preventing blood from absorbing the oxygen within. The damage is far worse than to be expected of, say, a smoker. And since nobody is proven to be immune to the virus, combined with a fast mutation rate, even healthy, young, strong individuals with naturally high endurance have died after getting COVID-19 more than once. It survives in water vapor, but is transmitted from the water vapor escaping your body. For example, have you ever entered a small, packed auditorium and felt the warm dampness in the air, that humidity? That is because the room has become saturated from all the mouth, nose, and sweat vapor that cannot escape the room. This is a breeding ground for SARS coronavirus 2, as your DNA is in these microscopic water droplets, which allows the virus to do its work. To elaborate, it is known as a coronavirus because the RNA strand in the center is shaped like a crown. The outer protective barrier of the virus can produce a spike protein, which can be used to attach the barrier to a strand of DNA. From there, the crown-shaped RNA strand exits the barrier and is injected into the DNA strand like a line of computer cone or a sperm entering an egg. These analogies are apt, because that is where all positive sense beta coronaviruses, such as SARS type 2, thrive. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, explaining in 2 minutes the same shit that I just explained.
There was a study that came out of China looking at these 3 families that went to a restaurant, and I could show you this graphic really quickly, but basically, if you could see that at home, one person, I believe labeled A1 there, was subsequently found to have the coronavirus. These are 3 tables, 3 clusters of families. None of them had been diagnosed beforehand. They were, you could see that 3 people at the table behind where this one person sat, a different family, were subsequently diagnosed. 4 people at the same table, and then 2 people at another table were all diagnosed with the coronavirus. Prolonged sitting, they looked at the timing, it was about 53 minutes of prolonged contact between these tables, and that gives you an idea of just how contagious this is. There was a fan, air conditioner fan, blowing from one side of the room to the other, and that may have contributed to the spread of this. But regardless, I mean, this is a really contagious virus. That has not changed. What has changed is that the physical distancing measures have been effective to a significant extent. So I just worry that we're gonna erase a lot of those gains and start to see people who get infected, people who get hospitalized, and sadly, maybe even people who die again.
Dr.
Now, I chose to use this video because Dr. Gupta used drawings to explain how catching a cold works. And I'm not a doctor. However, in May 2020, many major cities in the United States of America saw citizens blocking ambulances from saving lives and huddling together without protective equipment, but carrying a lot of guns. And why exactly?
Our community is struggling. My husband is on unemployment for the first time in our life. And it's unwillingly that we're taking unemployment. We want to go back to work.
Time for our state to be opened up. We're tired of not being able to buy the things that we need, go to the hairdressers, get our hair done. It's time to open up.
Who's ready to stand defiant against this governor and open up business tomorrow? Lock her up! 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 Lock her up!
I know that people are angry, and that's okay. And if you want to take it out and send it my way, if it makes you feel better, that's fine. We know that this rally endangered people.
2 weeks later, the United States saw its first predicted spike, 19,000 new sick people in one day, resulting from these protests. Immediately following this, on June 6, 2020, millions of people of color and many non-black people who support our struggle took to the streets, huddled together without guns. They were sometimes pepper sprayed, shot, hit with grenades, ran over, beaten, while unarmed, all across the globe. The difference between these protesters and the armed ones was that these ones wore protective masks. The mass media indicated that while there were people in these new protests that were sick, as of June 20th, 2000, never caused any spikes anywhere across the globe. The United States continues to rise as a new breeding ground for this wild-born exotic virus from the past. About a quarter of the 500,000 dead from this virus, about 125,000, come from the United States. In contrast, around this same time, in May, Canadians made it known to the media that they trusted their government to keep them safe, but 50% of Canadians, including those who did not adhere to the lockdowns, believed the government was hiding something, but were not sure of what. A month later, I made this panicked, pissed off asshole video. 1 more month later, a leak from the Canadian government proved that Canada and China have been trading coronavirus research for over 12 years. In Canada, there are now 109,000 confirmed cases of the virus. These numbers are not made up, and your government does not have enough money to throw at such a conspiracy and pay you to stay home and pay the rent for all the businesses that did not shut down due to the quarantine. Accept it. There is a silver lining, though, because since that government leak, more people took the viral threat seriously, and 66% of Canadian COVID-19 patients have survived. 8% of all known Canadian cases have died so far, but that number has been curving down due to the most people staying home, listening to what their elected officials told them would help, and wearing masks when they go out. Many Canadian COVID-19 designated hospitals and units now have empty beds because of this, and some hospitals have even returned to normal operations, which means that the most vulnerable among us will not have to be thrown into mass graves like many of the dead in the state of New York, where 71% of the 33,000 dead bodies to be buried came from the city of New York in the early weeks of the global lockdown. Now, in all of recorded human history, the only precedent we have when dealing with this pandemic is the Spanish flu. Its rarity causes many of us to either distrust authorities who may try to trick us into believing that they're helping us by locking us into our homes, and others to question the likelihood of a humanity-ending event occurring in their lifetime. As such, since most reports of SARS coronavirus type 2 were never publicly known until 2019, the skeptics are often diehard believers that they must be overtly opposed to the recommendations made by the World Health Organization. Through the works of many conspiracy theorists, government whistleblowers, journalists, and official government declassifications, a connect-the-dots style of roadmap can be constructed that traces SARS coronavirus type 2's existence back to the 1940s. For the second part, we will be focusing on official government documents, history texts, and human experiences to dispel as much as possible the possibility of these historical events being discounted as planted evidence. Information about the following events has been documented through human history as early as 1963. This information is all a matter of history, and not just history according to North America. Every attempt has been made to clear these events with intelligence gathered by non-friendly agencies as well. While I will not unlawfully disclose any government secrets in any of these 3 videos, I can assure you that the information provided is authentic. I'd like to thank you for joining us for part 1 of Operation Arcane Chaos. Tune in for part 2 to look into the history of this virus and what the world has done to try to stop it.